Hi, I'm Ray Lamb, and today we're going to be discussing riding fundamentals. Riding fundamentals are basically some things you need to be pretty competent at before you get on a bicycle. And some of them may seem straightforward and pretty easy, but really you'd be surprised how many people don't think about the small things. For example, we're going to start with how you get on and off the bike. You'd be surprised how many falls actually occur with people trying to get on and off of their bicycle. So I'm not sure there's an exact way to get on and off your bike, but there's some ways that are certainly easier than others. We're going to start with what I feel like is the best way to get on a bike or off a bike. I like to see, stand on the side of the bike that you're most comfortable with, place one hand on the handlebars, one hand on the back of the set, on the front of the saddle. Okay, then I stand far enough away from my bike that I can tilt it towards me and take my back leg and reach over that saddle, put both feet on the ground so that I'm straddling the top tube. Now I'm in a pretty good position to get ready to get in the starting position and go forward. When I get off my bike, I just do the same thing in reverse. I make sure I keep one hand on the handlebars. I tilt the bike away from me so that I've got a little bit of, I lower the height of the bike basically. And then, instead of reaching back and grabbing the saddle, I like to keep both hands on the handlebars. It helps me to lay the bike down. I can swing the back leg over the saddle until it comes to the ground and I stand beside my bike. There's some people that tell you, hey, the best way to do it is by holding the saddle and the handlebars and then stepping over the top tube with your leg. To me, I'm getting too old to get my knee that high, especially if I'm wearing riding jeans or something of that nature. And I don't like scratching the top tube of my bike with my cleat. So for me, it's the best way. Hand on the handlebar, hand on the saddle, stand away from the bike. Let the bike lean towards you. Step over with your back leg. You straddle the top tube. That's the easiest way to get on and off your bike. To explain a little bit to you about how to start and stop a bike, we need to go ahead and place the bike on a trainer so I can kind of get my point across without driving out of the view of the camera. First and foremost, once we've straddled a bicycle, like we talked about getting on our bike, then we're in a position we need to get the bike moved. And you got to remember, when you're talking about a bicycle, we only have two wheels. With two wheels, that makes momentum an extremely important deal. Without momentum, we, as well as the bike, will fall to the ground. So we've got to be able to keep momentum. A lot of times when people start and stop, you'll see people put the pedal, the outside pedal or the inside pedal, all the way down, and then they'll take their other foot and use the bike as a skateboard to get momentum, step up on the bike and start to pedal. Probably the worst idea that you could possibly have. Okay, what I'd rather see you do is make sure that we get a good forward push to get our momentum going before we actually mount this bicycle. And the way that I suggest to do that, if you find your dominant leg, mine's my right leg, and you get the pedal, and we're talking about the pedal, the crank arm here, that's at 12 o'clock. Okay, it's pointing straight up and down. That would be over at 9. That would be down at 6. This would be at 3. I always like to see it somewhere around between 1 and 2 o'clock. Okay, just a little bit past the top of the power stroke. And that's where I place my foot on the pedal. Then when I'm ready to actually go, what I can do is really apply good force with this leg. That gets the wheel spinning. I can coast. I can set my seat back on the saddle, place my other foot on the other pedal, and then I can resume pedaling normally. And this gives me enough momentum to make sure that I get going forward and I get on my bicycle without falling down. When it comes to braking, that's always important because at some point we've got to get off this bicycle. And to do that, we've got to come to a stop. There's a couple things I always recommend, and people, again, take this for granted, but it's something you need to make it a habit to do. Come to a complete stop before you try to get off your bicycle. I know it looks cool sometimes when you roll into a stop, swing the foot over the saddle and step off, but the reality is, again, a lot of times when you're riding a road bike, after you get a little bit more proficient at riding a road bike, you'll wind up wearing cleats, okay? Shoes that actually help connect your feet to those pedals, and those are slippery. So just coming to a stop is sometimes, a very tedious task. Make sure that you come to a complete stop before you put your feet down onto the ground, okay? One of the things you got to know about stopping is this. You got to understand how the brakes work. The brake lever on the right, that controls our back brake, our rear brake. The brake lever on the left controls the front brake. Now you got to get comfortable with which hand controls which brake, because one of those brakes is when you apply it, the effect is a lot more drastic than it is with the other. For example, if I apply the back brake too early or too quick or too hard, then all that's going to happen is my back tire is going to skid a little bit. That's not great, but it normally doesn't cause you to have a bad accident. However, the opposite is true with the front brake. If I'm riding down the road and for whatever reason, I grab the front brake, I apply the front brake too hard, and this is what happens to the bike. The bike goes airborne, and the back of the bike comes up, the front, catches the ground, and your weight and your momentum will be thrown forward. Normally this results in what we call an endo, where you go head over heels over the handlebars, and it's never a pretty picture, often quite painful. I'm not saying we don't use the front brake, but you got to be careful about how you use the front brake. So the first thing you got to do is familiarize yourself with which brake is which. And I would say that takes some time just going out and riding, practice stopping, using the back brake and applying the front brake gently and vice versa, until you can feel about how much you can pull on each brake lever to get your bike to stop without the tires skidding or without you going over the front of the bike. A couple things about the brakes that you need to know on a road bike. You know, the brakes are pretty important in that they help stop us, just like they do on a mountain bike. But the front brake doesn't get used quite as much as the back brake does, especially on a road bike. But on a mountain bike, that's just the opposite. Now, on a mountain bike, you use the brakes quite a bit to balance yourself and to keep you upright. So the front brake gets used quite a bit. If you're going down a slope, for example, and you hit the back brake, it's not going to stop you. The back tire will simply lock up and you'll just skid down the slope. So you're going to have to apply the front brake. That's about 90% or 95% of all the braking ability you have is going to be on the front when you're going down a slope. That's somewhat true on a road bike as well. It's just on a road bike, we're going down the slope. It's a gentle slope normally, going down a hill somewhere, or we have some speed and we're not worried about hitting obstacles or going over obstacles. So road bikes are a little bit different than mountain bikes, but the brake system works the same. The right brake always controls the rear. The left brake lever always controls the front. Make sure you practice applying those brakes. Don't just jump on a bike and take off, but make sure you practice applying those brakes, and make sure every time before you ride your bike that the brakes are functioning properly. You know, when it comes to steering your bike, that's kind of a funny term. People think often about, taking the handlebars and turning right or left. The reality is you don't turn the handlebars very much unless you're riding at a very slow speed, maybe, manipulating a parking lot or something like that. But when you're actually at normal speeds on a bicycle, there's very little turning of the handlebars. It's quite dangerous, actually, to turn the handlebars. So when we think of steering, we don't always think of steering using the handlebars. A lot of times we use our weight. Maybe we call that counter steering, to be able to steer the bike. For example, if I'm going to turn a bike, let's say I'm going to make a turn to the right. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure I pick out a good line visually. I have to pick out a good line as to the direction I'm going to go. Once I can see that line, then everything else gets a lot easier. Okay? If I'm turning to the right, then what I'm going to make sure I do is I'm going to have the pedal away from my turn all the way down, the pedal on the inside towards the turn all the way up. A couple reasons. I don't want, when the bike leans, I don't want that inside pedal to catch the ground and cause me to fall. So that pedal is going to be up. And then basically all I have to do is just sit on top of the saddle, trying to feel my weight go right down through the seat post and into the bottom bracket. And with my left foot, my outside foot, push a little bit down on this outside pedal and push a little bit forward on this inside hand. When I do that, the bike will tilt slightly and it will follow that turn. It will follow that path that I've chosen with my eyes all the way around the corner. The handlebars could maybe turn just slightly, but you would never notice it. Okay? It wouldn't be a physical turning of the handlebars which would cause the bike to skid forward, and you would probably fall. So steering is done a lot more with our weight than it is actually with the handlebars.